On this discussion right here. I got a lot of really great recommendations for books yesterday. I asked both theists and atheists to give me recommendations on what they thought gave the best case for their respective sides. Now, unfortunately, I don't think my original idea is really going to be viable because there really weren't a lot of votes. More so, everyone kind of had their own book to recommend. There were a couple repeats, but not enough that I could really call it a vote. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to be getting as many of those as I can and reading them. What I can do is a little bit limited though, because I'm trying to go for audiobooks as I can listen to them while I'm at work, and that seems to be working out quite well. Just in the past week alone, I've gotten through Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, Bart Ehrman's Misquoting Jesus, and today I went through half of C.S. Lewis's Miracles, not Miracles, Mere Christianity, which is a collection of his lectures put into book format, and it works quite well in book format, in fact. Now, I'm going to be reviewing at least the first half of that book, and I have to say I was very impressed with the approach that Lewis takes. Whenever I'm reading or listening to something by William Lane Craig, or especially Lee Strobel, my bullshit detector seems to go off quite frequently when watching people like that. Sorry if you disagree with me on that point. I don't get that sense with Lewis. While obviously I don't agree with his conclusions, what the strength of Lewis's work here, although it is the work of a layman, it does present a very internally consistent view of Christian theology, and a very basic one at that. He tries specifically to stay away from any sense of denomination in the theology, and just takes what the basis of Christian belief is. Handling things like morality for the most part of at least the first half of his book. So while the hardest thing to do, I think, for Christianity is to create an internally consistent view of it, and his attempt is very good. Unfortunately, it does, in the end, fail, and unfortunately, it fails at its very foundation, which is his argument that we basically have objective morality. He begins sort of with this idea. I think he specifically says that we are all bound to a single unifying moral law. Now, at this point in the discussion, he doesn't attribute this necessarily to Jesus, but just to the Creator. I guess he's going from the bottom up here, trying to explain the basis of Christian theology. Now, while I'm not going to argue against objective morality specifically here, I believe that Lewis's version of objective morality, or at least his reasons for holding objective morality in the way that he does, is, while not bullshit, misguided, and the product of the time in which he lived, which wasn't too far ago, but you can see the beliefs of the time really slipping in certain parts. Still calling homosexuality a perversion, and the idea of and certain sexual moralities that a lot of us really don't hold to today. While I understand that he's not disagreeing with anything that Christians today disagree with, the basis for his argument in regards to sexual morality does seem to be relatively dated. This is just coming out around the time when condoms were first starting to come into major use. And I would like to see what he'd think about seeing the statistics today that show that teaching kids to use condoms and not promoting abstinence actually decreases the amount of unwanted births and sexually transmitted diseases. I imagine he might have to change his tune, which is why I'm calling the information that he has a little bit dated. And now, The most important part of his argument for morality that I think he fails on is the answer to consequentialism that he gives. Now, I did 2 videos on consequentialism a week or 2 ago. Now, he contends that if consequentialism is true, if morality is only based on what we do at the moment, on whether or not there's a good consequence to that, he argues if that were the case, then why should he ever do anything good for anything else? Why should, if it'd be easier to steal a piece of bread rather than making it himself, why should he not steal? And that is his refutation to consequentialism as a whole. And unfortunately for him, he builds everything off of that contention, or at least the contention of objective morality, through this moral lawgiver, or this moral code that we all are aware of. Now, that's the issue with that is, of course, as I've argued, and as I'm sure most of you are aware, that doing what's best for you at the moment, stealing bread later, even if we lived in an anarchistic society, would not be best for us in the long run. That if it's easier just to push someone out of your way at that moment, it might not be so easy for you a moment later when he tries to retaliate. So his view of this is relatively narrow, unfortunately, and it's difficult to go on and listen to him at that point because he's making everything off of this foundation of under the presumption that he's proven to everyone that there's a universal moral code that all humans are aware of. There's a bunch of other aspects of that I don't think he properly addresses. Although his attempts are definitely very, very good. I truly think that this is, if you're going to read a Christian book, I think this is something that you should do. I think this is something that atheists should all read, not because it's going to convince you. I don't think that's really going to do that, especially given what I've seen so far. What it is going to do is help you understand what other Christians are going to say, because it really does encapsulate the lay positions of Christian theology that most Christians aren't really able to articulate themselves. Though the problem with debating Christians that aren't really used to defending their beliefs is that they're unable to articulate these points. And what's really difficult about that is that if they can't articulate them well enough, your refutation of them will not be sufficient, because you're really not going to be addressing what they actually mean, because they really haven't explained it to you yet. So if you really want an idea of how Christianity can be internally consistent, of course, I really don't think it's still right. I think this is a book that you should really go out there and read. Again, it's not going to be really threatening to your beliefs, but given it's coming from a former atheist, you can really hear it in all of what he's saying, that most of the contentions that he's bringing up to refute are contentions that he probably brought up at one point as well, and it was other people that explained his current beliefs to him. I'm not criticizing him on that point. That's just the sense that I got from watching, from listening to his book. So that's my initial thoughts. I'll go into a little bit of detail after I've listened to the rest of it and written some stuff down. Hope you enjoyed this video. Have a nice day. And I do suggest the book. Honest Discussioner, out.